welcome to Curator's Corner. I am Jan Loverin, Curator of Clothing and Textiles here at the Nevada State Museum's Marjorie Russell Center. March is Women's History Month, and I want to talk about women's fashions before the passage of the 19th Amendment. So we're looking at the Victorian era, and I have selected a beautiful bodice to share with you. This black silk bodice has been attributed to Mary Mott, Odbert of Mottsville, Nevada. If you look at this garment, you can see that there's a lot of detail and design work, including the beautiful folding up here, the ruching that goes across the center front on either side, and the ruching down here at the waist. Notice the size of this garment. It is quite small and it is very fitted to the bodice. Most museums would display a garment such as this right side out, but I am choosing to reverse it and show it inside out, which I'll do in just a moment. So now I have turned this very same bodice inside out. Notice the difference. Gone is the lustrous black silk fabric, and instead we can see the brown, dull lining fabric. But I think what you'll notice most is the contrasting red binding that has finished off every single edge of the darts and the seams, including the shoulder seams. The only seam that does not, however, have the red binding is the seam here along the arm. And that apparently is to have a little more movement for a woman to move her arm. As you look at this, I can tell you that this garment is machine stitched. It is definitely assembled using mechanization, but look at the buttonholes. The buttonholes are stitched by hand. That is, every single buttonhole is cut and finished with hand stitching. So now, if we look at this contrasting red fabric, the binding, and you'll notice on each one of these, there is a black casing that is filled with metal, steel, some kind of metal boning. There are 2 darts on either side in the front of this bodice that are also boned. Here's the center front and another 2 darts. If I turn this around, you can see the back of this garment. Here is the center back seam, also boned. And then there are 2 more darts boned as well. The boning is secured by the contrasting red fabric, creating little X's all the way up. So there are a total of 11 pieces of steel boning in this bodice. This is very restrictive, of course. You could barely bend over and touch your toes. It would be hard to raise your hand above your head. And in my opinion, it might be even challenging to get a deep breath of fresh air. But boning was an essential part of the silhouette that was popular in the 1880s. So many garments of this era, in fact, most garments, were truly constructed to be very rigid like this. Boning created the shape of the garment as well as it reduced any ease or sloppiness that was not fashionable at the time. Garments such as this reflect the restrictive nature of women's fashions in the 19th century before the passage of suffrage. So I guess I would like to share with you that I believe clothing really reflects society and culture. I would like to introduce now my colleague, Patty Bernard of the Nevada Women's History Project, who will talk to you a little bit about the social and cultural restrictions or limitations of women in the 19th century.
Thanks so much, Jan, for including NWHP in your presentation. Yes, women's fashion were very restrictive and paralleled a woman's life. We all know that women achieved national right to vote in 1920, but it was a long and arduous fight. Before suffrage, when a woman such as Mary Mott wed, she had little control over many aspects of her life. When she married, a woman lost her name, and in most cases lost control of her finances. If she married a non-American, she lost her citizenship and had to assume that of her husband. The age of consent in Nevada is 16. An unmarried female couldn't sell property at that age, even if she had it. But she could sell her virtue. Girls were seduced or stolen for immoral purposes, but penalties for traffickers were most often less than stealing a horse, as women couldn't be jurors, even in crimes against women. By 1900, many women were entering the workforce. While 8-hour laws had been passed in Nevada for men in such professions as mining, none applied to the labor of a woman. Her employer decided how many hours she worked and what her pay was. Thankfully, Mary Mott and the women of Nevada gained many rights with the passage of our state suffrage in 1914. This wasn't the case in many other states until the universal suffrage passed in 1920. Thank you, Jan, so much for having me today talk about women under the law.
I'm delighted. Thank you, Patty, for joining me, and truly thank the Nevada Women's History Project for connecting the relationship between clothing and social and cultural history. Thank you all for participating in Nevada State Museum's Curator's Corner.